It actually took me a while to remember exactly what I wanted to talk about for this one because it kind of paired off from what I was speaking about in the grind episode, the last one, in regards to grinding and starting from zero, because in it I'd mentioned like games like, like the Elder Scrolls and stuff like that. And that reminded me of a conversation I'd had with a friend of mine who does game development. Who's in Australia right now and working at a game company doing all kinds of wicked awesome stuff like that. Man, actually, come to think of it, maybe I should start a podcast and talk to him. He's got an interesting life. I'm getting sidetracked. Anyway, the conversation came up about, how you rank up in skills in video games. And typically the common formula is that, you swing sword, you hit monster, you gain experience caps, you gain level, put points into skill. Or the more you use that skill, the better that skill becomes. I prefer that method. That's, I think, why I enjoy Morrowind so much, is because you don't have to gain a level to improve your skills per se. If I remember correctly, it's more like the more you use a skill, the better you become at it. And as you level, which you do after you sleep, like once you've gained enough to level, you have to sleep, then you actually get to distribute some points into, if I'm remembering correctly, you can put them into those skills to like boost them up a bit more or to improve like some of your base attributes. But you could just run out into the woods and start swinging your sword at stuff or start throwing fireballs everywhere. And the more you do it, the better you become. I kind of think it would be more interesting to take that one step further and marry that in a way with the kind of leveling system which was slightly similar in Final Fantasy II, with a caveat. We'll get to that. In Final Fantasy II, the way that you leveled was similar in that if you swung a sword in combat, at the end, you'd gain a little bit of experience in using a sword. If you had used healing magic, you'd be a little better at healing magic, and your mana might improve slightly. If you had used any kind of offensive magic, that would improve. If you had taken a lot of hits, your defense, your evasion would improve. That's how it worked. Whatever you were using or however you were engaging in the battle would be the stats that would improve. And actually, there was no leveling. It was just that. It was just your skills that leveled, not so much your character. Like, it wouldn't say, Rise level 25. It's more just like, no, Rise got 75% efficiency in using daggers in a fight. And his evasion's pretty high. And he knows how to use fire magic pretty well. Other cool thing about Final Fantasy II, which I may have mentioned in an episode long, long ago, was that the effects of the spells would change. Like, for example, fire. When you first used it, it would just be like somebody just sort of like poof, like kicked up some wind into a fire pit, and like a little bit of flame had just gone like fah, and like fanned out. But then eventually it would be like a bigger flame. Then it would be a flame where the person was. Then it'd be a fireball. Before you knew it, you were just like dropping meteorites on people. It was this neat evolution of your magical abilities, which I also enjoy. But getting back to the point, I think a very simple way to make the grinding, leveling process in a game more interesting, more fulfilling, more of a challenge, and to keep people engaged in doing it, because even when you're doing it to get that skill to the very top, it gets repetitive, it gets monotonous, it can be a bit mundane. It's like, oh man, I gotta go into this dungeon and beat the crap out of a bunch of bony skeletons just so I can get enough experience to level up so I can use that sword, which is fine. But I think a way to make that experience feel like it's delivering more value on multiple levels is this idea: skill degradation. I'll explain what I mean by that. So, instead of going with a leveling system where there is a number, saying you're level 5, he's level 2, he's level 100, he's the big guy. Instead of that, go with the idea, like Final Fantasy II, of just focusing on improving skills. You don't have an overall level number. You have the efficiency with that skill. That is what you're leveling. Excuse me. Getting coffee burps here. So, That's the basis for the leveling system. But take it one step further. I would say similar to, actually I'll use Morrowind as an example, similar to Morrowind. You pick a couple skills, particular ones. And this is where I think it would work really well in an RPG. Actually, an MMO would be the best, I think the best use of this kind of formula. You pick like a couple set skills. So let's say you choose daggers, stealth, lockpicking. I'm building a rogue. And those are your 3 main skills. So they're going to level faster, more efficiently, and you're always going to be better at those 3 things than you ever will be with anything else. And because, kind of got ahead of myself there, because your skills will constantly degrade over time. I'm not saying that all right, you get your alchemy skill. Really focusing on Elder Scrolls if you can't tell. You focus on your alchemy skill and you boost that up to say 50. And then you wake up the next day and it's like, oh, now it's like dropped 10 points. Nothing like that. But I mean that for your set skills, you're always going to be the best at them. And their degradation in comparison to every other skill is going to be so minute, it's almost non-existent. They will, but it's going to take a hell of a long time. Have like a clock going, sort of like something in the background, that if you haven't utilized a skill within a certain amount of time, it's going to start losing value. So let's say you've got your alchemy skill up to 50, but in game time, you haven't applied that alchemy skill in a day. And I mean, you can adjust how long you have to do it time-wise. So let's just use that, a day. And when you go to check your alchemy skill after a day, it's dropped by 1 point. And maybe because you haven't used it in a day, or maybe because of that, or instead of losing that point right away, you go to try and make a potion, the success rates drop because you haven't done that in a while. You're unfamiliar with it. That would be another interesting level to it that I just thought of. Maybe it's like, your alchemy skill sucks. Like it's terrible. Like it's a 10. It's low. But the way you've been trying to improve it is just by making one kind of potion. Just one kind of potion. A health potion. Something really stupid, basic. And you have failed 100 times. But then you finally get it. Like, I'm trying to figure out a good way to kind of explain this idea that just popped into my head. It's like your skill's really terrible, but you have tried so many times to do one thing, a basic thing, obviously, because something complex will require a higher skill point value. But something basic like that health potion, you've tried 100 times, you failed, you finally get it once. Maybe you could also adjust it so that irregardless of the point value with something very basic, you can be terrible at alchemy, but because you've just been focusing on making a health potion, you can do that. Like your skill range was so low that you were going to fail a lot, but it wasn't low enough that you couldn't attempt to make the potion. And in doing it enough times, through just hard work and repetition and like putting your nose to the grindstone, you can make that potion with a very high success rate in spite of your low skill. That was an interesting idea, so apply that to it as well. But the skill degradation, I think, adds a nice element to the game because people have a reason to grind then. A lot of times I find in RPGs and MMOs, one of the problems when it comes to grinding is that it loses value and meaning. You're just doing it for gold or for gear or because you're bored and there's nothing else to do. But in terms of improving your actual character, in terms of stats and abilities, there's no reason to do it because you're already so powerful. There's nowhere to go. Like I said before, it's that issue of you're at the top of your game. There are no mountains left to climb. But if you do this, okay, maybe there's not any mountains left to climb in the sense that you know a bunch of spells. You're one of the best wizards out there. But even though you're this powerful mage caster, now it's kind of like, let me see, how can I put this? It's like exercise. You're not going out and grinding to become more powerful per se, although maybe there's an opportunity for that as well. You're doing it to maintain a sort of fitness level. You're doing it to make sure that your abilities, your skill, your proficiencies don't drop below a certain amount. Because let's just say you're a super powerful wizard. You can do fire magic really well. or you can do destruction magic really well, and you can do illusion magic really well. But you haven't used illusion magic in in-game time 6 months. And then you go to cast invisibility. And because you haven't done it in so long, you're not used to it. Maybe the incantation doesn't come out quite right. You've got skill degradation. You haven't used that spell even longer. How about that? Not only have you not used illusion skill in 6 months, you haven't cast invisibility in over a year. So on top of the fact that you haven't used the overall skill, and then you haven't used that specific spell, it fails. That would be interesting too. Add the skill degradation concept to abilities where it makes sense. For example, like casting a spell. You're great at illusion magic, but you've never really used invisibility before. So even though you're a master of illusion magic, there's a good chance invisibility will work. But because you haven't used that spell ever, this is the first time you're using it, there's a very good chance that it'll just not work or backfire. That's another thing I'd love to see them bring back, consequences for screwing things up. If you mess up in alchemy, maybe there's an explosion. If you incorrectly cast magic or you don't have enough mana, maybe the fire blows back on you and you take a little bit of burn damage. Maybe it destroys the gloves that you were wearing. Maybe there's a mana feedback and suddenly not only do you take a little bit of health damage, but now there's a temporary debuff on the amount of mana you have access to cast spells because you tried to cast something that was so outside of your league of skill and expertise. You're being punished for it because you incorrectly cast that magic. And now you got to deal with the effects. There's all kinds of little things like that, and it's actually bringing up a lot of ideas for applications on how you use different abilities in games. And I'll stick with Morrowind as an example, but because I could talk about this for literally hours. That's the basic idea. I think a way to improve MMOs and RPGs in general, add a layer of usefulness to grinding that it really doesn't have as far as I see right now, and keep people engaged in doing what is a boring and monotonous task, but making it feel like it has point, value, and meaning to it. I think skill degradation is the way to go. It adds an element of challenge, it adds an element of skill, and a point of pride when you're maintaining this level of efficiency for your character beyond gear, beyond level. And that's where I think level should just be taken out altogether. Just one guy's opinion, though. Love to hear your ideas on that. By all means, share in the comments below, because I think this is a good conversation. Anybody who's played the Elder Scrolls game, I think, can attest to that. Or Final Fantasy 2, because that is a delightfully broken game, in my opinion, and one of my favorites in the entire Final Fantasy series. Anyway, my name's Rye. You guys take care of yourselves.